Well, Mark Serwatka, the General Secretary of the Public and Commercial Services Union, is with us now, and Francis Maude is still here. But let me speak to you for a few minutes first. Are you embarrassed that so many of your members protesting today actually have better conditions and better pensions to look forward to than many people in the private sector?
Oh, no, I'm not embarrassed about that at all. In fact, it makes me determined to make the case that there should be fair pensions for all, and that the problems in the private sector will not be solved by slashing the hard-earned public sector pensions of which people were promised for decades.
So where do you imagine all the tax income is going to come from?
Well, as you've just seen in your report, the cost of public sector pensions as a proportion of GDP is falling. We've made the changes 5 years ago that modernised the scheme, took account of people working longer, and the result of that is they fall from 1.9 to 1.4% of GDP.
But you don't deny that people are living longer. You presumably accept there is a need for change occasionally.
There was a need for change 5 years ago, and we did a deal with the then Labour government we were told would last for 50 years. I don't accept the premise that because everybody supposedly lives longer, we've all got to work a lot longer. Many people will never live to 68 and see this pension that many of them have worked so hard for. So I don't buy into the notion that in the sixth biggest economy in the world, if you all live longer, you must work until you drop.
If the case is so transparent, why did so much of the civil service fail to come out on strike today?
Well, it didn't, Jeremy, and I think
we've got the figure. Francis Maude has the you can.
It was somewhere between a quarter and a third of the civil service.
Well, let me make the point.
Majority
Francis has had a good go. Let me make the point. But the government's behaviour is extraordinary.
Hang on, we're not talking about the government's behaviour.
No, we are. In terms of the figures,
I'm asking you why so many people failed to come out today.
And I'm saying to you, 2 million people were on strike.
Nonsense.
90% of PCS members were on strike.
Can you prove that?
No, they weren't, Mark.
Well, in reality, the only way anybody can prove it will be analysing the figure in the days to come, and we'll be happy to do so.
We've got the exact figures.
Because what this stuff about the figures about, it is the latest example of the government who's either deliberately misleading people or doesn't understand what the issues are.
Let's just check the methodology. I mean, did you get people to count how many people were at work today?
Yes, exactly. We've got an exact number. It was 146,000, and I've got it down to the last number. I don't have it in front of me.
Well, I can tell you, you claim it's 146,256.
Yeah.
I could say to you, even if everyone was at work, the idea they could get that figure within 5 hours is laughable. We know that this is basically an attempt to try and
civil service doesn't work that fast.
Well, they're not there. Jonathan Baum, senior civil service members on strike.
Are you seriously accusing the Minister of making it up?
I'm accusing the Minister, and I'll be very clear about this, of misleading and potentially lying to people about a number of questions.
That's a very serious accusation to make.
And I'm going to back it up. Mr. Maude has just said what he knows to be untrue, that people will get better pensions if they're lower or if they're middle incomes, proved to be untrue. I put to him earlier on mid-air. Mr. Maude also said, well, Francis, let me finish. He also said the Hutton graph...
You're sort of putting up...
Just hear what he said. Okay. Just quickly,
you're putting up an Aunt Sally to knock it down. What I have said very explicitly is that people on middle and lower incomes will retire on a pension which is as good and in many cases better than what they currently expect to retire on. They may work longer and they will pay more towards it.
And if your researchers go on the Cabinet Office pensions calculator, as Channel 4 did earlier on, it shows that that is nonsense. And it's also nonsense. It's also nonsense. It's your calculator, Francis. It's also nonsense that the Hutton graph assumed your reforms. Do your homework. 3 major reforms, it only assumed 1. The National Audit Office accept that the deal we did 5 years ago cut the cost of pensions by 14%. So when you can't talk about the detail of pensions, we have the extraordinary case of cabinet ministers running around hurling insults like schoolboys, making up fantasy figures and refusing to talk about the real issue.
OK, well, let's talk about...
Let me finish this one point. Not a penny of the money...
Why weren't you at the discussions
I'm more than happy
yesterday?
to take that.
Why weren't you?
Because they weren't negotiations.
The other union leaders were there. The other union leaders were there.
Francis,
and they were engaging in a really serious way with the issues which matter to your members.
You haven't negotiated. You haven't... Well, let me finish.
Well, you haven't answered the question yet.
I'm answering.
Why didn't you go? Why didn't you go?
Because they weren't negotiations.
How do you know you
chose not to go?
Because my Deputy General Secretary goes. He's been to every single meeting, and all they are is exchanges of information between officials.
Nonsense.
The negotiations...
Nonsense.
Francis, let me finish. The negotiations are with government ministers. They last met us on the 2nd of November. And what they've said to us is, that's our final offer, as you correctly put, and now we want our officials to just talk to you about how you share out the pain.
Okay.
We're saying we're not interested in sharing out the pain. You need to make concessions on the big question of forcing people to work longer, forcing them to pay more money in, not a penny of which goes into any pension fund. It all goes to George Osborne's coffers, and you then want them to get tens of thousands of pounds less. It's daylight robbery.
Got one last
That's
question
why
for you,
you
Mark.
will not debate the issues, Francis. You throw up smoke screens all over the place.
Why, if it's so wrong to move from RPI uprating to CPI uprating and increase
These are
pension
measures of
contributions, why in PCS's own pension scheme for your own staff members you've moved from RPI uprating to CPI uprating, and you've increased your pension contributions for your own staff, not by the modest 3.2% that we're proposing, but by 10%. Why?
More lies, Francis. Come down to my union headquarters and you'll see we haven't increased the contribution. We actually don't have any contributions. We are consulting and negotiating with our staff union about changes to a scheme which has had a valuation, unlike the civil service scheme, which hasn't had any valuation.
And it's only in surplus because you're making these changes.
And where we are trying to see if the scheme can be stabilised at the same time as giving people fairly generous pay offers. What you're doing is giving us a 16% cut in our living standards over 4 years, asking low-paid workers to pay 3% more in when they can't afford it, and it all goes to George Osborne.
It doesn't go to George Osborne personally. That's an absurd accusation.
To George Osborne's coffers in the Treasury. It doesn't go to pension funds.
Taxpayer, Mark.
Yes, but is it into pension funds? It's not into pension funds.
I just want to give Francis Maude a very quick opportunity to respond to this accusation that you lied. It's a very serious accusation.
Well, it's not a new one from Mark. And
it's true.
What I would just say is, why don't you come, put your pride aside, come to the negotiating table, engage as all the other union general secretaries are engaging. Come and talk. You might actually find that there's something there that will be for the benefit of your union members. But if you just wear your blinkers and refuse to engage,
I'll go better than that.
You're letting down your members.
Take up Brendan Barber's offer, get your ministers in the negotiations with us tomorrow, and we will all be there. But we're not talking to officials about divvying up the pain. You must negotiate about stopping the robbery of people's pensions.
Get off your high horse, Mark, and come and talk
you get off,
like everybody else
You
is.
get off your high horse, which is robbing low-paid workers, while you have millions in the bank and they suffer. That doesn't sound like it's fair to me.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you both very much.